All right, can I call a special meeting of council to order for Wednesday, February 28, 2024? Approval of the agenda, please. Councillor Noxena.
That the February 28th, 2024 special council meeting agenda be adopted as presented.
Seconder, Councillor Dussault. All in favor? Carried. Wildfire mitigation. Rinko Fionda, Wildfire Prevention Officer at Prince George Fire Center. Fort St. John to discuss wildfire mitigation with council and Tumbler Ridge Community Forest. So I know we have Duncan on Zoom. And Enrico's on there, and I'm not sure who the other individual is.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Dallas Gatchell. I'm a wildfire technician for the Dawson Creek Fire Zone.
Perfect. Welcome. All right, who would like to start us off from BC Wildfire Services?
Sure, I can start off. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, we sure can.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, so I think for this meeting, like Duncan had approached just to talk about some options for the community for wildfire mitigation and just maybe some of the programs. So I think if there's questions from council or from others, then I'm happy to kind of navigate some of those and just I'll go through a few kind of options that it's available to the community, and then we can have a bit of a discussion depending on what sort of questions come up. And then in terms of Dallas works for the zone out of Dawson Creek there. So if there's certain kind of projects that we could kind of line up with the community or other kind of questions specific about the response, then that's why Dallas may be able to speak a bit more too. So, but yeah, so in terms of programs available to the community, there's basically three in terms of wildfire mitigation. The first one is through the Union of BC Municipalities, and it's called the Fire Smart Community Funding and Supports Program. And so I've spoken to Dustin about this program already. So I know that the District of Tumbler Ridge has already has the intention of putting in an application for this year. So that's kind of the main program that's geared towards communities and municipalities or local governments to receive funding to undertake fire prevention work within their jurisdiction. So I'll talk a bit about that program, but I understand that there obviously is a level of familiarization already with that the community has with it because you are already submitting an application. But so I guess that program, it's again called the Fire Smart Community Funding and Supports Program. It'll fund up to $200,000 for the community to undertake all sorts. There's quite a diversity of activities that are fundable through that for the community to undertake. It's focused, there's a big focus on education and kind of fire prevention education as a whole for the community, whether that's through events or kind of going around and just educating private landowners as to how to undertake prevention on their own private property. And I think that's one of the good things about the program itself is that we've seen it with other fires in the past where these little activities around individual homes are what save the most structures and reduce the most damage. So it's those activities that are right close to the actual values that we're hoping to protect, that it's going to have the most return in terms of investment. So that's the big, I'd say, selling feature of the Fire Smart Community Funding and Supports Program. And with it, because it's such a big program and there's so many activities that you can apply for each year, there's sort of three that a community that's just getting into this program should focus on. And those are the three things that I've spoken to Dustin about, and they have been, as far as I know, included in your application for this year. So that's really good because these are the three things that you'll, as a community, would need to include in order to secure funding in subsequent years. So it's strategic. Your application so far, I've seen it, is strategic in the sense that it includes all of the necessary features, I guess, of an application that would allow you to access funding in future years. Whereas if you did not complete some of these activities, your application in, say, 2025, you wouldn't be eligible to undertake certain activities. So I'll admit the application process, it is quite onerous. And the first year that you're applying for it, it's a lot of work and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So I think Dustin so far has been able to navigate that quite well. But the advantage of including these activities this year that he has in the application is next year, the application process will be easier because of the three priorities that you've listed. So I'll go through what they are. The first activity proposed in this program that Tumbler Ridge is intending to do, as far as I'm aware, and I would just highlight that I recommend these three activities as well. So I highly endorse them for those reasons, for making it applications easier next year and to secure funding, and because they're effective. They're kind of the first place to start when you're hoping to basically create a new fire prevention program in the community. So the first thing, it's called the Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan. And I know Tumbler Ridge has completed a plan like this or similar plans. In the past, they were called wildfire protection plans. So I know this isn't the first time that Tumbler Ridge has done this, but I have the dates here. I think 2006 is the date that I have from the first one, and then it was updated in 2014 for Tumbler Ridge. So we're here at 10 years later. I think it's an appropriate time to be looking to update this, and it makes sense that that's part of your application. And it is one of the kind of key features that this program focuses on. So this plan will essentially guide all of the fire smart activities or prevention activities that would occur in the jurisdiction of Tumbler Ridge. So that's kind of one of the main parts of your of the program that you're already kind of embarking on. So there's quite a few things that we can, talk about in terms of what the CWRP would include and what it won't include. And some of it comes down to the community deciding as to what parts of which areas they'd like to focus on. And I mean that in the sense that it's primarily focusing on, obviously there's the education, which can include private land. But when it comes to actual fuel treatments or hazard abatement, it's focused on things that are owned by the municipality, areas that are owned, whether it's critical infrastructure that you own or parcels that are specifically owned by the municipality. There's no obligation to include Crown provincial land in this, although it is fundable if that was something that the community wanted to include. And I'm going to talk about two other programs after that can maybe bridge. It'll explain how Crown land is going to be looked at. Let's say Tumbler Ridge chooses not to look at any Crown provincial land in their CWRP. I'll show you, I guess, the other programs that will look at those. So it's not going to get missed. It's just whether or not it's something that the community wants to undertake versus the provincial government does. So generally, we've been seeing more applications that are focused primarily just on the land that the municipality owns. And it makes sense. It's your jurisdiction and they're your critical infrastructure. And then the Crown can work with the other stakeholders to come up with a plan for the Crown part. So
Rico?
Yeah.
Just want to point out a few things just historically for some of the councillors that may not have been involved with the prior works that have gone over the last dozen or so years. So it's probably important to emphasize the difference between a protection plan and this new process, which is the resiliency plan, which focuses, like you mentioned, just on municipal lands versus Crown land, because of course we haven't been doing it that way in the past, and there's reasons why the province has decided to split those away, because most communities don't have a lot of Crown land around them so much as perhaps Tumbler Ridge has. So could you maybe talk to that?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. Like the previous plans that it included Crown land. I think what we're seeing with some communities is that it's a lot of work to look at all of the Crown land within the area that we look at for these CWRPs is 1 kilometer around your kind of denser community. So I can show you a map of what that would look like for Temple Ridge, but just it was also part of your application. So it's kind of right, the 1 kilometer around the main town there, like core. And yeah, so looking only at the municipal owned land is different in the sense that you don't need to spend a whole bunch of time, I guess, or money to look at a whole bunch of forest. It's a lot of forestry looking at the other kind of aspects. So like some of the communities, it's an expertise thing and it's a scope of work really. So it turns into a lot more work when you start to include all Crown provincial land around in the 1 kilometer area around your community. There's advantages, I guess, to both, but I would say that's the big thing now is it's not a requirement, and the focus on the new CWRPs is a lot of it is like education, fire smart, and some of the activities, maybe I can get into that more, is like with that entire program is that there's things like they've just rolled out for seniors. You can go onto private land and help mitigate some fuel hazard funded through this program for seniors, which is a new thing this year. There's funding to create a structure protection trailer for the community. So there's all of these new activities that focus more on like resiliency for the community itself, not focusing on the forestry aspect of fuel treatments on Crown land. So that's the big separation, is removing that piece.
Well, that's a significant thing to understand with the new process now. In the past, we were focused primarily on fuel reduction, and a large percentage of it was on Crown land around the community, but there were some like around the pond that was private land, and some of the other small areas, behind the, the hotel and stuff done in the past. But this new resiliency plan, just so you can get your head around it, is focused on municipal lands, and it's more focused on, like Rico says, resiliency processes, not, thinning out or getting rid of the grass or in the Crown land beside my house. That would be another program.
Yeah. Yep, that's correct. Yeah. So I guess I'll go into the next thing, like the next aspects or components of a successful Fire Smart community funding program. So we have the CWRP, which is the plan that we were just talking about. And then the next thing would be, it's a Fire Smart Resiliency Committee. So basically, and maybe you will have something similar already in place. Like some communities have like a committee to discuss the prevention in the community, and they'll take things that are from that plan that's developed and help kind of push those agendas forward. So establishing a committee in the community, and then also there's a Fire Smart coordinator position that will be put into place, funded through this whole program, and that the role of that person is to ensure that, they'll help with the education and outreach of all the Fire Smart activities, but they'll be trying to implement some of the recommendations made in the CWRP. And I think that's a newer piece as well. So, but the good thing about that is we found that with some communities, like it's one thing to create a plan or hire a consultant to create a plan or however you get your plan done. But it's another thing to deliver on the recommendations. So having this position, this Fire Smart coordinator position, which is again funded to help push forward the actual recommendations in the plan, will help ensure that the plan isn't just sit on a shelf, right? And we're actually moving forward with the recommendations and seeing deliverables from that. So, so those are the three kind of components to, I would suggest for a first time intake, like for Tumbler Ridge for this year. And those three things, it's not saying that you can still undertake education and outreach activities as well. Like those are still parts of your application, but those would be the key focus areas for this year, in my opinion. And then next year you can look at other things, like if you are interested in starting to build a structure protection trailer, or kind of expanding to do a bit more cleanup on private property for seniors, or those types of activities, which are all part of it's all in the funding guide. And you can see quite an extensive list of suggested activities that are fundable. So, yeah.
Just a thought or two about the application. I've never seen it from. I wish the fire chief was here, but is a committee formed, and have they put suggested people to be on the committee yet, or do you know that, Enrico? Because I've not been. I would like the community force to have a member on the committee.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the state of the committee is in Tumblr, or if it's even started. I know it's one of the creating it is part of the application, or is one of the fundable activities. So any of the costs kind of associated with getting that up and running is going to be part of which will be approved through the funding process. So I don't know where you're at, but the recommended, like the community force should definitely be sitting on that committee. They play a big role in the community when it comes to the Fire Smart. So it really does come down to stakeholders that are interested, but also make sense. So like I can speak, like I worked in Nacast for the community force before, while I was outside of the government, and formed a committee and the community forest, but we also had woodlot like leaseholders there as well. So there was Interfor was part of it. So industry was a big part of it, but then there were also the kind of the local like ski club or snowmobile club that had an interest in those types of things. So I wouldn't limit it, but I would definitely invite people that you think would be interested, even just in prevention as well. So it can be as diverse as you want, but certainly like major like leaseholders, tenure holders should be part of that, or invited to.
Ms. Torval, if maybe staff could just discuss in regards to where we're at. I know we haven't started a committee and such, but with Chief Curry here, if staff maybe could just give that overview, just so I heard a comment about hopefully wishing that Chief Curry was here. He is here. So in the room, I guess maybe we don't have a wide enough lens. We have our CAOs in the room. We have Chief Curry, and then we have a minute taker, which is Karen Curry. And then we have a gallery full of residents. So just so you guys are aware of that. Ms. Torval?
Okay, yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Chief Curry, if you would like to provide input.
Happily. Good evening, everybody on Zoom. Mayor and Council, thank you. So our application has been submitted to UPCM, and at this time we've received a response back that we have a caseworker assigned to it, and it's under review currently. At this time, we do not have a committee that's established, as Enrico was stating. It is part of our plan. Should funding be successful, should it not, then it'll be coming to council for additional funding as part of the budget process to look at establishing that coordinator position and the committee.
Thank you. All right, Enrico, if you want to continue.
Yeah. Okay, so that kind of wraps up, I would say, like in a nutshell, the Fire Smart Community Funding and Support Program, which is, again, what you applied for here. So I'll go over two other programs that just more, I guess it's a bit of awareness piece, but there is an avenue as well for the community force to be involved if they wanted to. So I guess I'll talk next about this is the Crown Land Wildfire Risk Reduction Program. And so it is run by the forest district or the region. So this is a provincial government program that exists. And right now, so that program, the Wildfire Risk Reduction Program, is planning to do, it's called a Wildfire Risk Reduction Plan for the area. So they're going to hopefully do Tumbler Ridge is one of the areas that was proposed for this year. They're going to be looking at, this would be now the Crown land pieces, so provincial Crown land within 2.75 kilometers of around Tumbler. So that's kind of how the parcels of Crown land will be assessed. And they'll be looking at it specifically for fuel treatment through the lens of like a forestry fuel mitigation lens. And I know a similar plan was done a couple of years ago, or in 2021. And what we're hoping this year, if they are able to successfully move forward with that project, is to include the community forest a bit more in that process. I wasn't there in 2021 when that plan kind of went through, but I think it's been recognized that because the community forest operating area is so close, it's such a big part around the community that there needs to be some ongoing dialogue with the community forest during the plan development. So the idea is to have a plan done this year that would look at all the Crown land areas and identify pretty broad units that would make sense to look at further for fuel treatment prescriptions. So they're not identifying like site level units. It's more of a kind of a bigger area that makes sense to go ahead and treat. And the idea would be to prioritize them. So at the end of this, we could work with the community forest. They would have a plan that would identify high risk areas where if they wanted to apply for funding through another program, they could go and write prescriptions for that or and then treat it in next year. So that's one avenue. And then the areas that are not in the community forest operating area, the government could, if there are parcels that make sense to treat, then they could move forward with proposing treatments there and then going ahead and doing operational treatments. So I think the key to the success of this plan will be including Duncan and others who have an interest in the cutting like permits around whether it's woodlots or others in that 2.75 buffer, kind of right around Tumbler Ridge. So that's the Crown Land Wildfire Risk Reduction Program, and there is a wildfire risk reduction coordinator. So who works? They actually work for the region. So the BC Wild, like I work for BC Wildfire, so does Dallas. Our role in that program is kind of just we fund the program and then we'll offer some kind of technical support. But as we're not the land manager, BC Wildfire isn't the land manager, but the actual forest district is the one who has they're there to manage the land, which would include managing for wildfire risk reduction, and that's how that kind of program works and where we fit into it. So, yeah.
Contact for that yet?
Yeah, so I can give you one. They're hiring another person, so they're adding to the team, and I think right now it's one of the challenges I'd say with the program is staffing for sure. So there's a person I can send you an email, and I'd be involved in the conversations with them. They're quite new, so I think between yourself, me, and then the coordinator and the other person that they intend to hire in the next couple of months, there'll be a couple contacts. Yeah.
Great.
So yeah, if there's no questions kind of about the Crown Land program, I'll move forward with the other and last kind of program that's available.
Okay, Council, any questions? Councillor Klikash?
Yes, Your Worship. If you say that through the CWRP that it's 1 kilometer from city center and Tumbler Ridge?
It's 1 kilometer. There's a structured density layer. There's a bit more to it, but yeah, it's roughly 1 kilometer, and I can show you, like, I don't know if I'm allowed to share the screen here if people would see it, but would that work? Yeah.
Yeah,
You can definitely share your screen if you want. Sorry.
Okay.
The other part of the
I'll
question
pull it up.
is, if you say it 2.75 kilometers for community forest risk reduction, well, is that outside the 1 kilometer, or does that include the 1 kilometer?
So yeah, it would include, so this is the 1 kilometer, and this is what the application that you've submitted is to look at this area. Again, right now, the application didn't include looking at Crown land in here, so you'd be looking at any municipal owned parcels. And then, so this is a 1 kilometer buffer around Tumbler Ridge itself. And then our program, or the government's program, would be looking at something a bit more like this purple, bigger purple kind of line here, which which extends actually past 2.75 kilometers. I've expanded it to include a couple areas that would make sense logically, like that make a natural fire break that would make sense, I think, to look at in an assessment to see whether you could tie in some sort of treatment into existing features. So it would be inclusive of the 1 kilometer and beyond, looking at this purple area, and then also in the industrial area just south.
Follow up, Councillor Quackosh?
That's great, thank you.
The only question I have is, when you mentioned it was last done in 2021, and then the plan is to have it done in 2024 as well, did that come out from Ministry of Forestry? And the reason I asked that was one of the questions we asked at the UBCM was for them to do a redo on that plan. Is that where that came from?
It's possible, yeah. So it came through the district, like the region, I guess, the forest region. So I'm not sure exactly if it must have been, but all I know is that the region approached with the goal to update that plan this year. So
yeah, and that's good. No, that's very good news in my opinion. Councillor Noberry.
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka, and thanks everyone for coming and chatting with us about this subject. My question is regards to the community wildfire resiliency plan and proposed treatments. I know that we've sort of been given like you guys are doing a great job, everything looks fine, but in my opinion, like, I think we need to be a little more aggressive. Do we potentially see a opportunity for being more aggressive when it comes to treatment areas and methods, such as like setting up a rotational basis of going in and brush clearing, or going in and getting a large path of brush cleared out? Yeah, just throwing that out there.
yes, I mean, I think that it comes down to the prescription itself and what makes sense for the unit. So and what the community, I guess, is happy with too. So there's a lot of things that come into play as to whether an aggressive treatment is appropriate. Like from a fire behavior perspective, like, yeah, an aggressive treatment makes a lot of sense, but there's oftentimes, like we see it with other communities, right, where an aggressive treatment was prescribed, but the residents near it do not want it. So there's a bit of a balance that has to happen. And I think it comes down really to the community and what their tolerance is for an aggressive treatment. Things that can be looked at, though, and I think maybe Dallas had brought this up when we were speaking earlier, would be looking at, and again, it's a risk tolerance for the community, but burning some of the units to clean up surface fuels. Like, there's different tools that are available, but it's not, like, some of those tools take time and experience in order to use them appropriately, right? So a couple treatments, maybe you get a bit more comfortable with some of the thinning, and you see how it reacts to the winds in the areas, and then you can adjust the plans and over time develop ones that are more aggressive or at least more appropriate and can be maintained through either burning or cleanup. So yeah, it's the creativity in terms of what's acceptable in prescription is there's quite a lot that we would entertain. But there's a lot of other factors for sure. So I don't know if that answers your question, Chris.
Follow up, Chris?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Kakalka, and thank you for that answer, Miko. Could you potentially give us some suggestions on how we could gauge our community's interest in how aggressive we can go with these treatments, like just public sessions or what have you? Because I know this is a bit of a sensitive issue with a lot of people. Like, we do live in the wilderness, and people embrace that lifestyle. I do, but at the same time, I'd rather be err on the side of safety. You know what I mean? So, do you have any suggestions for us there? And who would take on that role? Would that be BC Wildfire? Would that be the municipality? Would that be the community forest? Would that be? Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I think there's a role for everybody to play in that. I don't think it just necessarily falls on one. So if I think about the Fire Smart Community Funding Program that you're currently kind of embarking on now is a great way to start educating people as to what is fuel treatment and what works. So that's one avenue, and that's something that is being funded through the program that the municipality would own in terms of education, what to focus your education on. I think, picking treatments that, as like, they call them kind of like as a demonstration is a nice way that we've seen communities to get comfortable with treatment, to see what it looks like. It's one thing to see something on paper or on a map, but to actually see demonstration of what a treatment looks like. And sometimes it means starting small, but allowing the community members to go and take a look and see what that actually looks like when it's implemented is a nice way to do it. And that can be kind of done depending on where the treatment is located. So if it's through the Crown Land program, then that's something that could be part of the kind of the signage or something that to demonstrate or educate as to what happened there. And then if there's areas in the community forest, like I think that's also a really good avenue to reach out to the community and show them what a good treatment looks like, is kind of a couple ways to do it. So it's a joint effort, but people generally like to see what a treatment looks like before it's applied like broad scale around their community, so they can get comfortable with some of the prescriptions. And whenever a prescription is written, there needs to be some level of engagement with the community too, so depending on its location. So that's another avenue to kind of educate and address some of the questions, and that's usually done by the author of the prescription, or if it's through the WR program, there should be some kind of representation there as well. So but yeah, I think like kind of getting back to the aggressive treatments, like I would just want to emphasize, like, it's important. The field treatment thing is an important part of prevention. It's one aspect though. And I kind of alluded to it at the beginning here, but the most important part really that we're seeing that actually results in structures being saved is the fire smart activities that occur right next to the properties. And you've seen it, like the fires that we've seen in the last couple of years, like a field treatment it allows or can create opportunities for crews to action a fire, but it's very rare that it can actually like stop it, right? So, but the actual treatments that you do around your house or that we do around like critical infrastructure is what, when a fire rolls through, it's those are the things that save the structures themselves. So although the field treatments are good and they're one aspect of it, it's certainly not I would say the priority should be around the actual values that you're hoping to protect.
Okay, any more questions from council? All right, I think you can continue.
Okay, so the last, and this is going to be kind of a quicker one, is the Forest Enhancement Society of BC, and perhaps Duncan's familiar with it, but this program here is another avenue to access funding specifically to do field treatment type work. So the community forest can apply as a licensee. Local government can also apply to treat to complete field treatments. They can also look at they can do assessments as well. But generally it's focused around the community again. So all of these funding streams are focused on kind of that roughly 2 kilometer kind of buffer around the community. And this also is focused kind of right around the community. So it's just another mechanism for the community forest if they wanted to directly apply for funding to do treatments. And it kind of be tied in a bit. There's a bit more flexibility with this program as to how to tie it in with operations that are already occurring in the tenure area. So I would suggest that this is something that gets looked at. I would also kind of suggest that this program, I think, ties in nicely once that wildfire risk reduction plan is completed by the forest region. Because then once you have that plan for all the Crown land around Tumbler Ridge, it'll kind of set out areas that if it's in the community forest chart area that they could use FESBC funding to go and write a prescription for as one mechanism to do that. So I do see it. The plan that is developed in the wildfire risk reduction side can be used to support funding, to support projects that are proposed through FESBC. Yeah.
So Rico, just so I'm clear on these two programs, once the district comes and does their risk reduction planning, and in conjunction with working with the community forest, I guess, it's all Crown land, or mostly Crown land, then there's no money in that program to do a treatment. That if you want to do a treatment and get funding for that, you would go to this one you're just speaking of.
So yeah, there's another way. There's a couple ways, and I'll admit it's a bit confusing for sure. So once that plan is completed by the wildfire risk reduction program, then there's kind of two ways to move forward with a treatment. And if the community forest wants to take a role in it and kind of own it, then that would be, this FESBC funding is probably one of the ways to do that, where they're the actual proponent who's receiving the funding. The other mechanism would be if the government, like the Forest District's wildfire risk reduction program, were to write the prescriptions. But I think that's what happened there like a couple of years ago, and I don't know if that was the best way to do it. I know there was some kind of I wasn't around for it, but from what I've learned is that there were perhaps some challenges with those prescriptions, and perhaps maybe not enough engagement with the community forest or the community itself. So there's different ways to do it, but if there's an interest in Tumbler Ridge or the community forest having a bit of more kind of say or ownership as to what these prescriptions look like, and it's in their chart area, then this is a way for the community forest to be the actual proponent. Whereas the other way would be that the government is writing a prescription in your community forest chart area, which can get a little, can be a bit more challenging. So I don't know if that's really the way that makes the most sense. You already have the cutting permit for it. It's already set up nicely for the community forest to do that if they want to, right? So there has to be that kind of like buy-in as well, and maybe it's like logically planning it with the other activities that are going on. So that's the nice thing about this. If the community forest is the proponent, they already know what areas are being planned for, and you can kind of tie in some of the wildfire risk reduction activities with the activities that are already occurring. So yeah, there's a couple ways, I guess, to implement treatments. It's just picking the one that makes the most sense and one that the people who are in Tumbler Ridge have the most say, I would say, is important. Yeah, so are there any more questions, I guess, about this Forest Enhancement Society program?
Yeah, Council? I guess I have one more question, and that's the fire risk reduction plan. Do we have a timeline? When you say 2024, is there a timeline set by yourselves?
Yeah, so it would be it's a fiscal year project. So it's actually would start kind of in April, and then the deliverable would be due at the latest by kind of next year. So April 2025 would be the latest. It'll need to be reviewed and all those things kind of before. So I would give them a field season and time to actually come up with a report and make adjustments. So that one, and again, that project is they're going to be looking at not just Tumbler Ridge. They're looking at a number of other communities in the South Peace is the idea. And there's a few things that still need to happen for this to move forward. Part of it is they have to secure the funding, which I don't think will be an issue. Like the government, it's funded through BC Wildfire, but that's kind of an internal thing. It should happen. But the other thing, it'll go out for bid likely, and then they'll have to pick a suitable contractor and all the kind of admin stuff that comes with it. So, but deliverable would be into the district and kind of completed ideally by like fiscal at the end of the next fiscal.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions from council? Anything from the community forest? I know we have Hugh Kingwell here in the gallery. I'm not sure if he has any questions. He's been sitting here on behalf of the community forest as well. I don't have any questions at the moment. I'd like to see the rest of it. Okay, good enough. Okay, you can continue on, Enrico.
Sure. Yeah, so I guess the only thing, those are the three programs. So the only other thing I would say, I guess take this time to say, is that there are a couple other avenues for us to work on prevention together. It doesn't have to be through a formal program. And I think it's working with like Dallas at the zone or myself and other people at the fire center. So if there's activities that we can have the crews come down and be part of your engagement, then that's all. If you're having a fire smart event or whatever, like those types of things are where we can kind of work together. And if things like prescribed burning, and maybe Dallas will end up speaking a bit to it, but like those types of activities where we can try to support is where we can have the local crews or that kind of stuff come out and work together. But yeah, I would say that these are the three formal programs, and then there's just the relationship with BC Wildfire, which is important as well. So.
Yeah, and 100% agree with the relationship. I know we had, and I forget the gentleman's name, but we had a Let's Talk, an open house, and the gentleman from Chetwynd came up that he was the incident commander on the Cascatna fire when it first started. And I think the public, he was well received, and it was great to have that information from somebody that was right at the fire. Obviously, it was after the fact, but it was great to have that information and be able to ask those questions. So, we appreciate that working together, we'll call it. But I'll be honest with you, I hope we don't see the same scenario we've seen in 2023. But I know we've communicated it very well through UBCM, meeting with ministers, but also meeting with BC Wildfire Service at the UBCM of the communication tool. I know we seem to, myself for sure, definitely there was a breakdown when we had the fire that we had to be evacuated for. That communication needs to be an open dialogue back and forth. That seemed like it was missed, or some of it was missed during our evacuation. Okay. Council, any other questions? I do have one. You may be able to answer it. Maybe Dallas will be able to answer it, or neither one of you will, and that's okay. The initial attack crew that was based in Chetwynd being moved to Dawson Creek, do we know why? Because there's been no engagement to us at all. My understanding, no engagement to Chetwynd either.
I guess I could speak to that, and I believe there was some engagement to Chetwynd because some people came up to the office here. The movement for the crews is we've got a new building in Dawson Creek. We still maintain our building in Chetwynd, so our crews are going to be moving over to Dawson Creek. They're hired this year, starting here. The reasoning behind it is direction from above. However, that does not mean that our crews are not going to be in Chetwynd. They will sleep in the residence in Dawson Creek, but we base our crews all around. Sometimes we're in Tumble Ridge, sometimes we're in Hudson Hope, sometimes we're in Chetwynd. But that was the direction. I can't say the exact reason why. It could be with retention, but that's what we were given is happened.
Okay. And I appreciate that. Thanks for being able to answer that, Dallas. And like I said, I know when I was reached out, and obviously I was on the radio this morning, but I said there may be a reason which I am not aware of. I know when I talked to the mayor from Chetwynd, maybe there were some missteps there, but understandable. We know that BC Wildfire Service was in our community last year. We know you guys move them around. I mean, obviously it's your organization and your staff, but the big concern is when they have that initial attack all moving. And I think you just mentioned it, maybe it is retention from, hearing back from your staff where they're located. I mean, I know it gets tougher and tougher from your guys' side as well when it comes to manpower. So I appreciate being able to answer that for me. Any other questions from council? Sorry to cut you off, Dallas.
Oh, I was just going to say, and just so you know, we are planning on moving our crews from 3 people to 4 people this year. We do have a small zone, so we actually rely on imports from other zones when we have significant fire hazard and stuff. But we are increasing our numbers for single resources and initial attack crew members. And
And that's good news. And I know one thing through the PRRD. I mean, obviously the community of Tumble Ridge supported it as well at the UBCM. We asked the BC government to give you guys all the tools for your toolbox, whether that's more staff, more air support, whatever you guys needed is what they should put in your toolbox for you. So hopefully you guys will see some of that this year with all the communities pushing on the government to make sure you guys you have anything and everything you guys need for if a fire season happens. So normally we don't do question and answer period with. I'll go to Councillor Norbury in a second. Normally we don't do question and answer period when we have a delegation. But I guess my question would be to BC Wildfire Service. Would you be okay taking questions if there is anything from our gallery?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm gonna go to Councilor Noberry first, and then I'll open it up to the gallery.
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka. I don't want to hold back the questions from the gallery, but I did have one question for Duncan in regards to the community forest. Last I spoke with the community forest, I requested that the community forest look into engaging in some more wildfire mitigation efforts, and the response from the community forest was they wanted council to sort of give them, I don't know how to say it, but they wanted council to officially make that request of them. What sort of form would that sort of take? Do you want like a motion and a letter to the community forest from the council asking the community forest to engage in more wildfire mitigation efforts and going through the Forest Enhancement Society? Yeah, can you give some advice there?
Thanks, Counselor. Well, this has been a real informative meeting for lots of us because you can sort of see now the different avenues, I think, of jurisdiction for one, and funding sources for other. So as far as, I know now, but in the past, these last 10 years or so, we worked with the district, and whether we were on Crown land or municipal land, we discussed what we would do there, and we treated it the same, apart from the logistics of the administration. So now it's not like that anymore. Now it's the municipality and the work that the fire chief is going to do and stuff. That's separate from us. So now I can see what the first step. I would wait for this program to get done at the district level from the experts in the wildfire group there from the district, and then work with them. And then come if council wants us to. If there's recommendations from that, then we would approach council and say, what do you think if we do this or that? That would be my thoughts today, rather than asking for council to tell us what they'd like us to do, because you can see now, you sort of have to have the data in front of you to make a intelligent decision. If someone comes to me, for example, one that's been on the table is somebody had some grass, and it was, I think, partially Crown land, partially municipal land, in the backyard kind of thing, and they had a concern that there was a fire source or fire hazard there. Well, now we can break that out. So, the part that's municipal owned, that could go to the fire chief side. The part that's the other side, if these prescriptions that get done, or this, these suggestions that on Crown land, then we would take them forward. Does that make sense? Well, I have the poppet here too. I mean, just to follow up on your other question, Chris, we've done some pretty large scale, and I mean, they're large because they're close to a community, but 35 hectare treatment units, and there's 3 or 4 of them around the community we've done the last 10 years. And those were extensively discussed with the community as best we could, like open houses, talks with the council and other things. And then after the fact, we would go back and look at them as well. So those have been done, and it's so for folks in the gallery that may be new to Tumbler Ridge or newer, is we even have signage up. If you go to the golf course, there's one there, for example, that shows why we did what we did there. So we have been working with council and with the town folks to try to, do things that they would like us to see do.
Thank you for that, Duncan. Appreciate it. Any questions from the gallery? And if you have a question, we just ask you to come up to the delegation table, just so the people on Zoom will be able to hear. Just want to come up to that table there. Just up to this one where it says delegations, Larry. It's just so they can hear us on Zoom. Sometimes they can't hear it without speaker.
$200,000 seems like a lot of money, but it isn't when you're working the fund. What happens when the funding runs out?
So my understanding, I mean, maybe Chief Curry can answer, or sorry, staff, but my understanding is that that's the initial amount for year 1, and then we can reapply for year 2, year 3. That was a question we had at the previous council meeting. And you're talking about the Fire Smart Coordinator position, or the thing that?
Yeah.
Mr. Earl, if staff can just go over that. I know we talked about that at the previous meeting when it was approved to go through, but there's more than just 1 year that we can get funding. The first year, we're asking for $200,000.
Yes, Council, I believe it is for 2 years. And I will defer to Chief Curry to confirm that.
Your worship, yes, the CAO is correct. So $200,000 is for the first year. We are eligible for an additional $200,000 for our second year, and we'll be applying for that based on the recommendations that come out of the CWRP. Future funding is still on the table past that second year. And we'll be searching for funding opportunities. If it's not through UBCM, then through other avenues. I'm not sure if Enrico wants to kind of piggyback onto any of that, or correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, the 200 for the first year there. And then the funding amounts can change like through the UBCM program, right? So things change as the program develops, new activities are eligible, the amounts change. So, but for this fiscal year, it's $200,000 what was applied for. Yeah.
Okay, my second question is, I'm here representing the Saddle Club. I'm wondering if we could have a representative work with Mr. Curry in mitigating the fire hazard around the Saddle Club.
Okay, I would think Chief Curry being in the room, he'd probably reach out to you. Or you could reach out to him too.
Yeah.
Talk to him, for sure. I can't tell you that staff will automatically go and do it, but if you reach out to the chief, Larry, and talk to him, we're all about that. I mean, not just our local volunteer fire department, BC Wildfire Service, but even staff, council, we're all concerned, right? We all want to make sure whatever we can do or assist or look at, that we want to do that. I mean, that's why we invited this, or the community force set this up, and we had the Let's Talk with BC Wildfire Service. So if you just reach out to Chief Curry and talk to him, I imagine he'll come out and have a look.
Okay, thank you.
And probably the community force too, because I know they did the first initial fire mitigation out there. That was done by in behind the Saddle Club was done by community forest.
Yeah.
So even maybe when Duncan's in town, him himself and staff would go and have a look.
All right, thank you very much.
You bet. Anytime.
And just to add to that, it's a bit complicated in the sense that the majority of that area is Crown land, especially to the north, east, and west. But the southern portion, right where the Saddle Club starts and the horse area, arena stuff, is municipal land. So it's a combination there.
Yeah, it's a mixture. Council Norbury?
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka. I just wanted to respond to Mr. White's comments there. I believe the $100,000 is just for plans, but when it comes to treatments, I can't speak for the rest of the council, but I mean, if we have expansive recommendations from there, I would think we would do everything we can to complete those treatments and areas as quickly and best that we can. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions from the gallery?
Hello, Duncan, it's Jonathan Howe. We know each other. Just have a question regarding the area of prescription, or maybe someone from the Wildfire Service could answer this as well. What I'm wondering is what would be a timeline for the two separate zones, the 1 kilometer zone? What kind of timeline would we have, or would we be looking at to get prescription and treatments done in that area, as opposed to the 2.75 kilometer zone? What would be the timeline we were looking at to actually get those done?
So for the 1 kilometer, I'll go to staff because that's part of the grant that we've applied for. That's my understanding of the Fire Smart program. It's within the 1 kilometer range. The 2.75 range that they talk about doing the fire reduction or fire risk reduction plan starting in April of 2024 and possibly finishing that plan in 2025. And then I would think that's where they'll get that, what kind of fire or what kind of treatments need to be done, field treatment. So I think you're looking at a year, but I'll go to staff first in regards to the Fire Smart program that we're applying for at this time. And then if BC Wildfire Services wants to answer in regards to that 2.75.
Okay, thank
Ms.
you.
Torval?
I'll defer to Chief Curry.
Sorry, I had too many mics on.
Not a problem, Your Worship. So as I previously stated, so our application is in. We've got confirmation that it's been received. At this point, we're just waiting for essentially the go-ahead that we've been successful in our funding application. Once that happens, it's going to be full steam ahead and getting this coordinator position posted, in the committee formed, and then working on this plan for the 2024 season, and likely looking into the possibility of field treatments and everything for the application for 2025 as part of the funding model through the Fire Smart program.
Thank you to staff for that. Enrico, did you want to just maybe give an oversight of that 2.75? Because my understanding for the fire risk reduction plan, it's going to looks like a year. And then we would look at treatments after that, or we look for treatments while we're doing the plan? I believe that's kind of Mr. Howe is looking for.
Yeah, so normally the plan is done, it'll take about a year, we'll say. And then once the plan is in place is when the prescriptions can be written. And then generally the prescriptions are written because a lot of the restrictions are around a field season, right? So how much work can get done in the prime kind of field season to complete the forestry activity. So I would be expecting prescriptions in 2025. And depending on, I guess, the capacity to complete treatments, whether that's the following year to actually start breaking ground and actually complete a treatment, normally it's about a year. The prescription has to go through some reviews as well. But I would say that's kind of the general timeframe. If there are areas that are identified that I think are very clear that it's a fire hazard, and perhaps through older assessments that were done that there's an agreement on, then those are things that can also be looked at for treatments before the plan, I would say. Obviously, the plan is important because you want to make the treatments logical. But again, if there's areas that I'm not local to the area, but if there's areas in the community forest area that make sense to treat, then that is something that can also be looked at. But I would say, yeah, a year after the plan to write the prescriptions, and then usually another year or so to actually complete the operational.
Okay, thank you. I just have one follow-up question for Dustin. You seem to know about this, Dustin. The $200,000 in funding, some of that money is going to be used to create the plan for the 1 kilometer zone around Tumbler Ridge. Will the remaining funds then be used for the actual mitigation? Is that the idea?
Ms. Torval?
Thank you. Chief Curry?
Your worship, and to Mr. Howe's question, so the $200,000 is going to incorporate the plan, it's going to incorporate the funding for the actual position, and it's going to provide for all the supports necessary for training that individual, for the committee work that would happen, all of the public outreach in terms of fire smarting, or fire smart education, and everything like that. So it's not going to have anything to do with the actual mitigation that's there. That's what the $200,000 application will be in. Well, part of that will be in 2025 when we apply for that additional $200,000.
Okay, so in 2025, the $200,000 or some of that is allotted for the actual.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's the intention, is we're going to have fuel treatments based on the plan or whatever the outcomes are going to be from the resiliency plan. If they're going to have that in there, if they're coming out, because we're looking at more, yes, a kilometer from town proper, but we also have the airport. We have district assets that are outside of the town proper that we're going to be looking at as part of these urban interface zones. So it's not just town site, it's going to be the airport, it's going to be the heavy industrial park. We've got a few of them that were identified, so.
Excellent, thank you.
You bet, thank you. Any more questions from the gallery? Yep, please come up, Hugh.
One question and just a comment. The question, I guess, would be what role is, at this point in time, what role do we envision First Nations taking in the construction of the plan and in the completion of the prescriptions that would come up? So that would be the question. The second comment I would make is around prescription. Prescription is a very sanitary term. And I think if you go out to the community, depending on whether the fire is cresting over the ridge or it's snow on the ground, you're going to get a very different view on what people will embrace as a prescription. I think that there needs to be a fair amount of involvement and discussion around what are the expectations. I don't think people would like to see visitors coming into town and believing the moment they've driven into town that they're on a logging show. And I think the community forest, from the community forest point of view, what we can provide is the ability to log, to liquidate trees. It's a different ask to look at coming up with what's left afterwards, which might be more of something you'd look for inside a community, much more park-like, low-risk fire, but visually pleasant. I think there needs to be a bit more discussion on what these prescriptions are going to look like, because you're talking about taking 2 kilometers around this community, and you can either look like you've gone through a bomb crater with stumps and logs, and really a prescription is about removing fuel, largely, and strategically, but it doesn't mean it's going to look nice when it's done. So that's another stage after, it needs to be part of the discussion on prescription, I think.
Yeah, and I think Rinko mentioned that in regards to what does the public or what does the resident see in the treatment? You know, is it a heavy treatment? Is it late treatment? And I think that's the engagement process with residents. And I understand when you talk about visitors coming up and they, I know I've heard the term when we were first evacuated and allowed back in, everybody wanted to clear cut around the whole community and stuff like that. And I think, the average spark fly last year was 8.5 kilometers. We're talking 2.75 right now. So I think that's where you have to have the engagements with the public to see what us, the residents, really want to see. I look at some of the stuff that the community forest has done in our community or around our community, and it looks great. Like you look at whether it's the golf course, in behind the Vic Center, down across from South Common. That's been fire prescribed from community forest side. So I think you just need to get out there, engage, and have and I know Duncan did a great job back in the day before that all started. And at first it was hard, I think, for a lot of residents. When they seen some of it, they're like, oh, we got to stop. And I wasn't on council at the time, and I don't know if Mr. White was, but I remember council that day actually putting a stop to it at first until they could do more engagement with residents, because they thought it was going to be all taken out. Yeah. And to me, you look at it today, and I think, it looks great. So I think that engagement process, and Enrico had mentioned that, is what do our residents want to see when it comes to treatments? How harsh of a treatment compared to a light treatment? And I think that engagement has to happen on that side of it. But your first question, I'm not sure if, Rico, if you remember the first question, or we can re-ask it.
First Nations. Around First Nations engagement. And it is built into the processes. So specifically around the prescriptions themselves, there's the requirement to consult with First Nations. So it will be part of the prescription development for sure. And certainly with the WR, like the Crown Land Wildfire Risk Reduction Plan, like there will be there will be a certain amount, I guess, that will come with any sort of planning that happens on the landscape. So, but in terms of the actual consultation at the prescription phase, that's where it legally has to occur.
So from that, I would assume that they would be part of the committee or whatever is formed.
Yeah, it's from our Fire Smart one of ours that we're doing within the district.
Well,
or are we talking about
both?
Well, we definitely would be doing it, but Ms. Torval, let's go to staff, because I know we reach out to our First Nation partners all the time, whether it's through True Date or each individual nation. But Ms. Torval?
Yes, thank you. I'll defer to Chief Curry.
Your worship, and to Mr. Kingwell's question, so First Nations absolutely will be consulted and part of the committee, and they'll have representation on the committee. We would not want to result in anything that might be culturally sensitive or anything like that. So absolutely, they will be part of that discussion.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
You're good? Okay.
Oh, actually, I didn't have one. Sorry.
Yep.
Maybe it might be for Duncan as well. As if there's an identified volume that's coming out as a result, is that volume additive to what the community forest can harvest, or is that taken from what our existing volume is to harvest? So we already have harvesting plans. So do we have additive wood, or is it coming out of what we're already planned and scheduled?
No, if there was a cut block, if you want to call it that, or a prescription area that removed mature timber, it would be part of our harvest or cut. It has been in the past.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions from the gallery? Okay, I want to personally thank BC Wildfire Service, Dallas and Enrico, one for coming and filling us in regards to programs and answering the questions, but also being open to have our residents in the gallery ask questions and answer them, as well as staff. So normally we don't do that. Normally we don't allow during delegations for residents to ask questions. Normally it's at the end of the meeting, and be honest, it would be tough for me to answer some of those questions when it's not my forte. So I want to thank staff and both members from BC Wildfire Service, as well as Duncan from the Community Forest, to be able to do that and when residents have questions, and especially in a gallery like this, and trying to figure out what's our next move from the community side with mayor and council, as well as the fire department and Community Forest and BC Wildfire Service on how to mitigate fires around our community. So thank you for that. Anything from council? Any other questions? All right, well, thank you. Oops. Thank you guys very, very much for coming in and joining on Zoom. Sorry you couldn't make it in person with the weather.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us.
All right, any other
you.
questions? Oops, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I just said thank you.
More than well, thank you, Dallas. Okay, take adjournment. Councillor Noxena.
That the February 28th, 2024 special council meeting be adjourned.
Seconder, Councillor Dussault, all in favor? Carried.